All right, so for chapter 4, we're kind of wrapping up our segment discussing the hotels and lodging. Okay. On Wednesday, we're going to do an in-class activity about hotels, and and then next week, as a reminder, we will not have class next week on Monday or Wednesday. Okay. Um, Monday or Wednesday, we will not have class, but there are online assignments for you to do. Okay. It's basic. I think it's reading chapters 5 and 6. Those are your online assignments for you to get done, as well as the quiz for chapter 4. Okay. Um, so class is not canceled. It just means it's independent study, and you can do your study from wherever you're going to do your studying. Okay. The building, this classroom will not be open during our class time next week. Okay, on Monday or Wednesday. And then when we come back, we'll jump right into chapter 5. We'll talk about cruises, and we'll jump right into the rest of that. Okay. Questions, comments, concerns? All right. So, chapter 4. Continue the discussion about a hotel. What is the primary function of a hotel? Okay. Yeah, exactly. A place for somebody to stay and sleep. Okay. What's that? That is the primary function, right? A place, a way for us, for travelers to have a place to sleep, a place to rest. Okay. What are some expectations when you stay at a hotel as a guest? What are some expectations? How do they fulfill that primary function? Sebastian. Okay, so having some positive guest interactions. Good. What else? Right there. A good bed. Okay. Yeah. What else? Michaela, right? Awesome. Clean. Absolutely. Right. One of my biggest pet peeves is hair in the bathroom. Like, I understand that somebody else stayed in that room before me, but if there's hair in the bathroom, that's probably about the only time I'm actually going to complain and ask housekeeping to come back and re-clean the bathroom. Most things I can just overlook, but for whatever reason, I don't know what it is about hair in the bathroom. Okay. Um, and so it's really important for us, um, as we are thinking about our visitors that are coming to our hotels, to understand what that primary function is and how we get that. Okay. Typically, we talked about last class the different levels of service. We talked about select service. Okay. We talked about full service, luxury. We talked about a variety of brands that are covered under different hotels. Okay. And so each of those will determine kind of what the structure of the hotel um, organization looks like. Okay. But essentially, we have who's at the top of the organization chart for any hotel. The general manager. Okay. The GM. The general manager is at the very top. Okay. And then we have different departments within the hotels. So rooms division is anybody that has to do with the rooms. So that's front desk is selling the rooms, housekeeping is cleaning the rooms. Okay. Um, Food and beverage, they oversee what? The restaurants, potentially catering. Okay. So different events. Good. We often refer to food and beverage as different outlets. Okay. So different outlets are what we kind of refer to as kind of revenue centers. So that would be things like the restaurants, in-room dining. Other outlets might be the spa or the golf course or the snack shop that's right off next to the front desk, right? So those are all different outlets that our guests can take part of and bring in revenue. HR, what does the HR person do? They hire, they, what's that? Handle complaints. Good. What else? They have to fire, and they have to train. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Sometimes they do have to fire people. Okay. Security is also something we also call LP, which stands for loss prevention. Okay. Our industry loves acronyms. We love to call things up like something different from what they are. It's not room service, it's in room dining or IRD. Okay. So we like to abbreviate things, but loss prevention. What is the primary role of security officers? What's that? Okay, so maybe to keep order and peace. Good. So they make sure the people are safe, but they also make sure. Okay, so they may have to do investigations when. Yeah, absolutely.
They investigate and produce the results. And at some point, it's either handed out to external law enforcement and HR.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're in charge of keeping people safe, but they also are in charge of keeping the assets safe, right? The hotel, the products, and the things, the items that are in the hotel, also responsible for keeping them safe. And then if things go wrong, if things happen, then LP, the loss prevention people, are the ones who are going to do the investigation to make sure what is actually happening. And it can be if something is missing from a guest's room, it could be something if there's items missing from the hotel as far as like amenities or maybe food is missing. They're going to do that investigation. Okay. Sales and marketing. Okay, so sales and marketing is selling the rooms. Okay. Sales is selling the rooms. Marketing is doing what? What's that? Advertising. So they're promoting the hotel. Okay. And so when we talk about sales and marketing, if I call the hotel and make a room reservation for tonight, am I going to be working with the sales office? What do you think? Yes or no? If I call the hotel tonight and just say, I just want a room for just for me, just for tonight, am I working with the sales office? No. Who's working with the sales office? Conventions and groups. Okay. And typically, what we're looking for is a concept called a room block. We are selling room blocks, basically a block of rooms. Okay. Typically, depending on the hotel, but typically a room block is 10 room nights or more. Okay. That's a great question, Michaela. I was going to ask y'all, what does it mean by room nights? 10 days. Okay. So Maita thinks it's 10 days. The combined total of rooms, right? So let's say, so for example, my sister's getting married in Houston next month. Well, a month and a half, right? In November. So she's getting married in November. And so Halloween, she's getting married on November 1st. So we have Halloween, 10/31. We have 11/1, which is the day of the wedding, right? And then we have 11/2. So we have a room block, that's 3 nights. If there's, let's say, 5 of us staying, then 3 rooms times 5 is 15 room nights. Okay. So it's basically all the combined total that we need. Okay. So I might say I need 200 room nights over the course of the weekend, right? But that's not necessarily I'm going to do 200 each night. It's just total for the weekend. I need 200 rooms. So really a room block is anything that's usually 10 rooms or more, 10 room nights or more. Okay. Why do you think sales is going to take that reservation? So it's yes and no. It's not quite guaranteed because if I say I'm going to fill 10 room nights, yes, I have to fill 10 room nights. Otherwise, I have to pay for them whether or not I use them. So I guess in a sense, it is guaranteed room revenue. But why else might sales take that reservation? Let's think about it for a convention. We have 100 people coming in for a convention. So sales, exactly. If there's going to be any kind of banquet or things like that, lunch being served, breakfast being served, sales is going to take care of all of those details. Good. Yep. What else? As far as the room reservations, exactly. So we're not going to sell those rooms because they're going to block them off, take them out of the inventory, and then that way front desk doesn't actually sell those rooms accidentally, right? Then we're oversold, and that's not a good situation. Okay. The other thing too, like if it specifically is for a group, let's say it's a St. Philip's College group, right? The sales can actually create a code, right? So that when they put in that code on the regular reservation page, they put that code in and it automatically pops up the exact dates, the exact rate that was agreed upon, right? Because sometimes if we are doing large groups, sometimes they do give us a little bit of a break in our room rate. But that doesn't mean that that's all the money we're going to get. Oftentimes they give us a break in room rate because we're going to spend money on food, right? And so we have that. So why? And then last thing is our accounting department. They're the ones who are making sure the money's coming in and our bills are being paid. Okay. So they're keeping track of all of that. And this constitutes our executive committee. So the heads of these different departments are going to get together on a regular basis. Some hotels, it's on a daily basis. Some hotels, it might be a weekly basis, right? We have, I think we talked about, I can't remember which class we talked about it in, but we have talked about in a previous class called Stand Up. We talked about it in this class? No? Okay, so Stand Up is essentially usually between like a 15 to 20-minute meeting that all the heads come together, heads of the departments come together, and they have a quick stand-up meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning. All right, this is what's going on in the hotel. Today, we're going to have this group checking out and this group checking in. So sales, what do you need? Housekeeping, what do you need? Okay. And so that stand up, we're typically talking about what's going to happen today, but then also what's coming up in the next couple of days, the next week or so. So that way we understand, okay, housekeeping, don't forget, today's Monday, but Thursday, this group's going to check out and we're going to have 400 checkouts. And then 3 hours later, we're going to have 300 check-ins. Okay. And so that kind of helps them get prepared for the week. So that constant communication. Has anybody ever been a server before? Okay. You have a pre-shift, right? It's the same kind of concept of having a pre-shift. This is what's happening. This is our special. This is what we're going to be doing today. Okay. So rooms division. Typically, this is the first point of contact for the guests. If we have valet, they're going to pull in and they're going to park their vehicle, right? Valet is part of the rooms division. If we don't have valet, who's the first person they come into contact with? The front desk agent, right? And so rooms division is one that is the one that we have the most interaction with the guests. Housekeeping also, because they're part of the rooms division, the rooms division typically is the largest staff of the hotel because housekeeping is typically the largest team within the hotel. How many of y'all prior to reading the chapter thought about or understood that there's this whole guest cycle that guests go through and hotels are evaluating each step of that cycle? Okay. How many of y'all did not realize that? Cool. Okay. So then what's the first stage? Before they check in, they have to make a reservation. Okay. Or they might be a walk-in guest, right? They're walking in and asking, do you have any rooms available? That happens. But usually that pre-arrival stage is the reservations. What are some things that guests are thinking about in that pre-arrival stage? Yeah. So think about, you're the guest, you're trying to make a reservation to a hotel. What are some things that you might take into consideration? How many people the reservation's for? How many people are in your group? Good. The cost, absolutely. What else? What types of services and amenities the hotel offers, right? If you're a family, do you want free breakfast? I mean, if you're an individual, you may want free breakfast, right? Um, but think about that. Like if you pay a family rate, right? If you have a family, it's helpful to have free breakfast in the morning. There is a brand we did not talk about last week. It's called Drury. Anybody ever stayed at the Drury Hotel? Um, what's the signature about Drury hotels? They have the free breakfast, but they have their evening kickback, right? And so it's heavy appetizers. Usually they have like hot dogs and nachos and chicken fingers and salad. And then for the adults, you get 3 alcoholic beverages every night that you stay. They give you a little card and they check off when you get your beverage. So if you're a family and you can get breakfast and dinner covered, that's a pretty good deal, right? So those reservations, things that we're going to be taking into consideration, okay? And then we check in. At that point, we're going to assign the room based on what they make. If they made a reservation for 2 double beds, we're going to try to accommodate that, okay? And then while they're there, while they're occupying their room, what kind of charges might they be racking up? Room service, okay? Sorry. Oh yeah, absolutely. The mini fridge, okay? Possibly like movies on cable, good. Cable, maybe even gaming. They have gaming now where you can bring in your own controller and you can have gaming. What else?
Like, I know when I was at the family, guests would have housekeeping, like if they needed a shirt pressed or needed a suit,
Absolutely. Laundry.
it would take care of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So they let's say they needed their shirt pressed. Let's say they have a meeting coming up and their suit got wrinkled or maybe they spilled something on a shirt. They need to get that laundered. As long as it's out by the certain date, certain time, then it can be returned later that day. And there's a charge for that. Absolutely. Good. Anything else? Anything else we can charge for? Okay, yeah. So we may have like a rollaway bed. Absolutely. A lot of hotels are actually going to more towards air mattresses than a rollaway bed. I've seen that lately, and those air mattresses can be pretty comfortable compared to a rollaway bed. It's a lot more compact for storage, and then also they don't require a lot of maintenance for them as well.
Air mattress is like easier to pop, so you're charging somebody for a brand new air mattress when it's new for one.
Well, typically though, like rollaways, it usually it's going to add, depending on the hotel, but usually it's going to add anywhere from $5 to $10 to the room rate, just because it's the extra body, right? It's the extra towels, it's the extra soap and shampoo that's being used. So you're not necessarily charging for the actual bed itself. You're actually charging for the extra body in the room. So that's typically what that extra charge is for. Yeah, so if you have a pet deposit or a pet fee, yep, okay. Lots of things that the guests can be charged for. Golf, spa, they can charge it back to the room, right? Um, what's that?
Sometimes you're charging.
Yep, charge meals back to the restaurant. So even if you're eating room service, let's say you eat or drink at the bar, you can charge that back to the room if you're a guest. Okay. Then each night, our night audit. The night audit position is the one who works from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Okay. There is always somebody at the front desk 24 hours a day. Sometimes that night audit is the only person of the hotel staff inside the hotel at night, until breakfast usually comes in and helps start setting up breakfast. But that person, the night audit, what they're going to do is they're going to be looking at all the accounts. Okay. And when I charge my card, at the beginning, they're going to pre-authorize, okay, you're staying for 2 nights. We have $50 per day. Your room and charge is this much. So we're going to pre-authorize this amount. Let's say we're going to pre-authorize $400. Okay. Well, then they check every night. Okay, David, he's getting close to that $400. We might need to have him come down and reauthorize a larger amount, or we can just turn off the charge purchases, the privilege, so people don't charge any more to the room. Because what we're doing is when we pre-authorize with that credit card, we're basically saying, yes, there's enough to charge this much when they check out. If they go too far beyond that, they may not be able to pay that when they check out. Okay. So with that checkout, then we're actually finalizing the payment. Okay. And then hopefully, because we did such an amazing job, that when they come back, they're going to make the reservation at that hotel again. Okay. And then the cycle repeats itself. Questions, comments, concerns about our guest cycle? No? Okay. Talked about front office already. One of the things that we're going to talk about in on Wednesday is different KPIs. Okay, KPIs. And KPI stands for key performance indicators. So key performance indicators. Now, we're going to talk about this from a hotel perspective, but in reality, you could also do this for restaurants, for baking, right? Anything really. Amusement parks. Okay. So one of the KPIs that we're looking at for hotels is our occupancy percentage. Okay. So our occupancy percentage, we take the number of rooms we have occupied and we divide them by the total of rooms available. Okay. So let's say one night we sell 150 rooms, but we have 200 rooms in our hotel. What is our occupancy percentage? We divide 150 by 200, we get 0.75. Okay. And we move that decimal place over 2 spots to give us 75%. Okay, 75% occupancy. Most hotels are going to have a goal of what they want their occupancy to be for the quarter, for the year. Okay. And so does every single night have to be 75%? No, maybe some nights we're 100%. Maybe some nights we're only at 60%, but the average will come out at the end. We can go daily, but we can also look at the average for the quarter, for the 3 months, 6 months, and for the whole year. Okay. So any questions about rooms, about occupancy percentage? What's up?
There was a term mentioned, I think maybe the simulation,
Okay.
and they mentioned that you had 4 rooms available at, and I may have misread it, to exclude house rooms or rooms that were, for some reason or another, they were not just, they're not available.
Yeah.
I mean, not because they were not being, I'm sorry.
No, I understand what you're saying, Christian. So that's the great point. Let's say, for example, we have 5 rooms that are out of order, right? They're out of order because the toilet flooded in one room, and not like nasty flooded, it just flooded, right? It just kept running, so it just flooded, right? Or maybe like let's use another example. During the pandemic, remember when we had the frozen, the snowvid, right? And it snowed for a couple of days. I forgot that I had the bathtub running. And then I left and I came back an hour and a half later and water was everywhere. Thankfully it was an apartment and they never billed me. Cause I guess they didn't see it. Anyways, so that's water damage, right? I can't sell those rooms because the carpet is soaked. I have to dry it out, right? And so what I might do in that case, because in that particular day I didn't have those rooms available, I might actually take them out of service and divide by 195 instead of 200, right? That's what it means by rooms available. Because otherwise it's going to affect my occupancy percentage, right? The other thing we oftentimes do is, especially if a hotel is going under a renovation, most times when hotels go under renovations, they do it floor by floor. So they'll take an entire floor out of service. So that way they can focus on getting all those rooms done. The guests don't go, the elevator won't even stop on that floor. Okay. And so the guests don't even go to that floor. We can work overnight so we're not bothering the guests, next door. But typically what we'll do is then we'll take those rooms out of service. So we'll deduct them from our inventory. So that way it doesn't affect our occupancy percentage. Average daily rate, ADR, is another way that we look at. Okay. Do we sell rooms, all the rooms for the exact same price? No. Who can give me an example? Amethyst, can you give me an example? No? Okay. But you know that we don't sell them all for the same rate. Okay. Maite. Yeah, absolutely.
You need it the same day or the day before.
Absolutely. Good. Okay, so when we price our hotels, we talk about supply and demand. Okay? So when we talk about supply and demand, think about it from the perspective of when our supply is low, right? Which means we have a lot of reservations, we have less rooms available, and the demand is high. This is going to be like $4 signs. We're going to go up in our price. Okay. But if supply is high, meaning we have a lot of rooms available, and demand is low, meaning there's nothing really going on, we may try to sell our rooms for a lower rate. Okay. But then as demand picks up and as we make more reservations, our rate is going to change as we get closer to it. So maybe somebody booked 3 months ago and they got a great deal, but then I came in the day of and I'm going to get charged a higher price potentially, right? And so typically what we're going to do is we're going to add up all the revenue. And how do you find the average of any number? To find the average of any numbers, we do what? Add them all up and then divide by the number, right? And so let's go back to our previous example. We sold 150 rooms. Okay. And let's say our total revenue was $15,000. What is $15,000 divided by 150? $100. That doesn't mean that we sold every room for $100. Some rooms maybe sold a little bit less. Maybe some rooms sold a little bit more. Okay. What else might be a reason why a room might cost more than another room? Sebastian. Okay, yeah. So if we have 2 beds, then we may assume that 2 to 4 people are going to stay there. So a double occupancy might be more expensive. Okay. Is the room with 2 beds always more expensive? Why?
Depending, like, if you were in a large city, you had one 2-bedroom rooms facing kind of like out towards the suburbs, nothing really spectacular, but you have the one on the other side that's facing the Rocky Mountains. It's like you said, like we discussed in the first class, tangibles.
Yeah.
They're not something you put your finger on, but you produce the entire experience.
Exactly. So the room location, is it a city view versus so for example, downtown, are you looking at buildings or are you looking at the Riverwalk? Which view is more desirable? Those rooms might be a little bit more expensive. Okay. So location, absolutely. Along those same lines, so I have a conference coming up, and so I made a reservation. The king room, one king bed, was actually more expensive than the 2 double beds. Because typically on this particular conference, people aren't traveling with their families. So a king bed would be more desirable for somebody that's traveling by themselves than having two beds, right? But I had a friend of mine who used to own the Comfort Suites down here by the Alamo Dome. Okay, and when she built her hotel, she was part of the planning from the very beginning. She built the hotel. When she built the hotel, um, she intentionally put more double beds, two beds, than king beds. Because one of her target markets, one of the groups she wanted to go after is sports teams and cheerleading teams, right? And you can always put one person in a room with two beds, but you can't put four people in a room with one bed, right? So her idea was, as part of her marketing plan, because she's close to the Alamo Dome, and that's where they do cheer competitions, they do sporting things like band competitions. She intentionally put more double beds than single beds, right? Now, I don't know a lot of specifics, but there may be certain criteria when you build a hotel, the certain breakdown of number of rooms. I do know that there has to be a certain percentage of the rooms that you have, there has to be a certain percentage of those rooms that are ADA compliant. Okay. So if you have, there has to be at least one ADA room compliant for every room type that you have. Okay. So if you have double beds, then you have to have at least a certain number of ADA room compliance. What is, the next time you're at a hotel, you might look at this a little bit differently. What is one of the indications, without even going into the room, what's an indication that a room might be an ADA compliant room? Anybody know? Just by you're walking down the hallway and you're like, oh, that's an ADA room. What's that? Maybe a little bit wider door. Good. What else? The peephole. There's usually two peepholes. What's the lower one for? Somebody's in a wheelchair. Okay, so there's two peepholes. That's an indication that it's an ADA room.
Also, there's sometimes plastic flat.
Potentially, yep. So they indicate the handicapped accessibility. Good. The other indicator is that there's a doorbell. Okay, so some hotels will actually have doorbells so that when they hit the doorbell, if someone is hearing impaired, there's actually lights in the room that flash. So that way the person, if they are hearing impaired, they'll know that somebody's at the door. So there's really cool different things you can do. Next time you're traveling, you'd be like, impress your family, be like, I know that's an ADA room. And they're like, I don't care why. Like, I don't understand why you know that, but this is a little random fact. One day when you're on Jeopardy and you win Final Jeopardy because that's the question, I would like a little piece of that. Yes, go ahead. Yeah,
You don't want to see small.
absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, very good point. All right, one more. Let me finish up my thought on this real quick before we move on, Christian, and then I'll bring up your. I'll let you answer your or make your comment. One thing that we're not talking about here is revenue per available room. I just want to bring this up just as an example. So this is called RevPAR, revenue per available room. Okay. And with RevPAR, we take the same revenue number, but in this case, we're going to divide it by the 200 rooms we had in the previous example. So when we take 150 or 15,000 divided by 200, what do we get? Is it $75? So my revenue per available room is actually $75. Okay, because that's going to take into account those extra 50 rooms that I did not sell. That extra 50 rooms that I could have made money on, but I didn't because I didn't sell them. Okay, and so this revenue per available room also is a metric that hotels will use. If I have 200 rooms and Christian has 250 and Brad has 175 rooms, we can actually use our revenue per available room calculation to see how we are all competing against each other. How full are we getting our hotels? Because obviously, Christian has more rooms, he has to sell more, right? So he may have more revenue, he may have more money, but he also has more rooms to sell. Okay. So just something to think about. Occupancy, ADR, and RevPAR are the three KPIs that hotels really kind of look at. Christian, what was your comment? Okay.
I've done it with your, and I've noticed that like certain conventions, seminar types, like when they had all the teachers come to town, you had 3 and 4 people splitting the double bed, but when you had like the neurologist convention here, they were getting one person. You know, the demographics that you're dealing with would also, like in this case, be a bonus, especially like around things like yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that goes back to what we talked about in one of the first couple of slides, the sales office. When the sales is making that when they're selling that room block, when they create that room block, they're going to know, do I need more king beds? Do I need more double beds with that room block? Okay. Housekeeping is known as the heart of house. Okay. The heart of the house. They're the ones that honestly work the hardest. Anybody in here went to, I know Sebastian, you did, went to bed making competition? Oh, Brianna as well. Josiah, yes, Angel. Yeah, hold on. I know it. I know it. What's the first letter? Robert. I knew it. I see the one little help. Yeah. So what was y'all's impression about the bed making competition? How fast they can make it? Yeah. Was anybody keeping track of times with their judge? Josiah, what was the fastest y'all had? 1 minute and 30 seconds. That was a mattress pad, a fitted sheet, a flat sheet, the blanket pulled back, tucked in, hospital corners, 2 pillows. 1 minute and 30 seconds. Now they're probably not doing it every day at the hotel in 1 minute and 30 seconds, right? But in a competition, how fast can they make that bed? Yeah. And they all looked, I mean, there were some that they were obviously going for time, not neatness. Okay. But there were some that were literally going for neatness and time. I don't remember who the winning hotel was. Well, the winning hotel was the Westin Hotel, Westin downtown. They actually won the whole competition. But I don't remember who the winning housekeeper was. But they walked away with $500 cash. So they are the ones that typically the housekeepers in the largest department. Housekeepers, depending on the hotel, typically have anywhere from 15 to 20 rooms to clean in a day. It also depends on the type of room. So is it a suite? Is it a standard guest room? Is it someone who is checked out and now I have to get that room ready for somebody else? Or is it somebody who's going to stay overnight and I'm just going to go in through and collect trash, make the bed, not change the sheets, just make the bed, replace any amenities in the bathroom, right? And so those are what we call stayovers. Somebody who's just staying over. And then we have checkouts. Those are the ones that have to be fully, completely cleaned. Everything's replaced. Okay. Most hotels are going on a credit system. Okay. So they basically have every housekeeper has to basically do about 20 to 30 credits a day. And a stayover may be 0.5 and a checkout might be 1.5. Right. And so take whatever that total number of credits they have to do, divide by everything they have, and that's going to tell them how many rooms they have. Okay. So it kind of just depends on every day what the workload is going to be. I will say one thing about if you're thinking about going into hotel sales, one of the things that you can absolutely do is to help out your housekeeping team. So if we know that example I gave a little bit earlier, we have 300 people checking out today, and then a few hours later, we have 200 checking in. if what we can do to help our housekeepers is wear some khaki pants and a polo shirt and come in that day and start stripping beds, right? So as we can work together as a team, all they have to do is go in and replace amenities, clean the bathroom, replace amenities, and make the bed, right? So we have our housemen, which are the people who usually go in and collect trash. They may strip the beds. They're also the ones who are responsible for the public spaces like the hallways, the lobby, making sure all that area is clean and presentable. We have the room attendants. Okay. I was talking to one of my other classes, and I always realized how a conversation was going to go with a guest if they came up and they're like, the maid did this. And I'm like, oh, you have an antiquated perspective on what this is not a maid. They are a room attendant. Housekeeper is even acceptable, but room attendants are the ones who basically take care of everything. Then we have supervisors. Supervisors go in and they double check the rooms to make sure they're ready to flip over. And then we also have laundry. If we have an in-house laundry, we have people that are responsible for just focused on the laundry. Okay. If you are in a large operation like the JW Marriott, or not, sorry, scratch that, not JW, the Marriott River Center that's downtown. Okay. They actually have folding machines. So you just clip the corners of the sheets on, and then it sucks it into the machine and it irons it. And then when it comes out the other side, it's all nice and folded. And all you gotta do is fold it in half and then put it on the shelf. Same thing with towels. Put the towel on the machine and it goes through and it does its thing. And when it comes out the other side, it's all nice and folded. You just pick up the stack of towels and put it on the cart, right? So we have some ways to kind of make things a little bit more efficient. Food and beverage, we talked about already. Room rates, we talked about slightly. Rack rate is that rate that we want to try to get. It's the highest rate we can get. Okay. Oftentimes, depending on where you are, it's different for different locations. But oftentimes, that rack rate is published behind the door, on the back of the door. So if you close the door, and it says the price of this room is this amount, it's usually pretty exorbitant. It's usually pretty high. And the reason why they have that rack rate is to prevent from price gouging. So if something happens and they're like, you know what? Well, we can sell this room for $2,000. Well, no, you really can't, because the maximum price is set at this amount, right? And so that rack rate is usually published behind the door. Now, if you think about way back in the day, the reason why it's called a rack rate is because there was literally a rack at the front desk, and each room had its own little piece of paper, and that was the rate in the rack. So you'd go and pick up that piece of paper, and that was the rack rate that you paid for that hotel room. Okay. Everything else is usually a discount off of that rack rate. So even our daily rate could potentially be a discount off of that rack rate. We talked about RevPAR already. Sustainable lodging. Okay. We talked a little bit about this last class, about green, being green. So we're not going to talk about it. We already talked about it. All right. Questions, comments, concerns about chapter 4? About hotels. Any questions about hotels? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But, you know, the owner of the hotel was like, this is what we want to do. Because the day ended at 3 a.m. Okay. And so he was like, well, you know, if somebody comes in, you could give them a cheaper rate, but they need to understand that checkout is still at 11 a.m. They don't get additional time, because essentially if we do that, we give them another day.
Right.
Free.
Yeah.
What I've never understood is the fact that there was like an early
Yeah. So to that point, if somebody is coming in, let's say they come in at 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night, maybe even midnight, right? We're going to give them a rate. Checkout still at 11 because housekeeping still needs that room back to clean it. In order to, so we're going to charge them the full day's rate, even though they're just coming in at midnight, right? Um, we might offer them a slight discount, but there is a point where we're actually losing money. So we don't want to drop below a specific rate. Early check-in. Yeah, we can absolutely we can charge an early check-in fee because that means that maybe I have to bring in a housekeeper an hour early in order to make sure that your room is ready by noon, right? So if checkout's at 11 and you want a guaranteed check-in time at, let's say, 9 a.m., so early check-in time, I may have to put that room out of service the day before, which means I'm losing money there. I need to get that money back. So that's where that early check-in fee and or late checkout fee comes in. A late checkout, if checkout's at 11 or 12 and you want to stay until 4 o'clock, I'm going to charge you a certain amount because I either have to keep a housekeeper late or I won't be able to sell that room that night because the housekeeper won't get a chance to clean it before they leave at 5. Yep. Good questions. Good question. Anything else about hotels? This one time I had friends come visit down to San Antonio. I met them at the Alamo. Um, and then someone in the group had to use the restroom. And so we went to one of the hotels because I know where all the hotel restrooms are, lobby hotels, because you just never know. And then I was like, let me take them to all my favorite hotels. And so we went to the St. Anthony, the Gunther, the Valencia, the Drury. And at one point, I heard my friends talking in the back, and they're like, I've never been on a hotel tour in a city before. And they were my fifth grade teaching buddies. And I was like, well, this is my world now. This is what I do. And I love hotels. I love talking about them. I love showing them off. San Antonio has some really cool, unique hotels. Um, all right. So if we don't have any other questions or comments or concerns, we'll go ahead and leave it there. Let me give you a sneak peek of what we're going to be working on. I'm going to print out these pages, and we're essentially going to, with these 4 hotels, ABC, or just 3 hotels, sorry, 3 hotels, we're going to evaluate their KPIs, okay? And then we're going to answer these questions. So it's going to be an in-class activity, just doing some math. You can also take this and do the same thing for restaurants, right? How full is your restaurant? If you can accommodate up to 200 people a night and you only served 150, then you only filled your restaurant 75% of the way, right? And so you can do the same thing, just different inventory. Well, that's all I have. Thank you all so much. I'll see you on Wednesday. Wednesday should also be a relatively short class.